The 22nd of January, 1879, Isandlwana in Zululand. The light is hard and clean, the grass long enough to whisper. 11 days have passed since the ultimatum ran out like a fuse, and about 1,800 men in red and khaki believe the morning is theirs. Their rifles are oiled, their confidence rehearsed. They stand where the hill lifts like a shoulder from the plain, and they measure the world by the reach of their guns. Beyond those folds of earth, more than 20,000 warriors sit in a quiet that feels deliberate, a quiet with discipline in it, a quiet that keeps its own time. Nothing dramatic announces what is coming. The bugles do not cry, the sky does not darken, even the oxen only shift their weight and breathe. But the day has already been shaped set not by the men polishing brass in the camp, but by a commander the empire barely names. Ntshingwayo kaMahole has chosen the ground, weighed the hour, and taught his army to hold its breath. He understands that silence is a formation, that terrain can be sharpened, that timing is a blade you draw only once. What follows will not be a miracle, and it will not be an accident. It will be a plan arriving on foot, a net rising invisibly until it touches at the edges and there is nowhere left to go. You know the empire's story of itself, the red line, the modern volley, the myth of inevitability. By the end of this film, you will know another story, the one where confidence meets craft and breaks. Welcome to African Power Stories. Watch what happens when a professional of few words turns numbers, earth, and patience into catastrophe for those who were sure they could not lose. How do you win before the enemy knows the battle has started? You start the battle long before dawn, and you start it in a man's mind. On the maps carried in leather cases, the war begins as straight lines and neat arrows. 3 British columns will cross the Buffalo River, step inward like closing doors, and meet at Ulundi to fold a kingdom into someone else's plan. In London, the word is confederation, a tidy promise of order. South of the river, it feels like a hand pushed into a house without knocking. The empire trusts paper parade ground geometry, timetables, a doctrine that says a camp drawn wide on open ground is a sign of confidence and control. The soil keeps different books. January rains turn the earth to clay that grips cartwheels. Oxen patient, stubborn, choose their own pace. Wagons string out until a column becomes a rumor of itself. Every mile pulled out of the landscape thins attention, stretches nerve, and teaches men the wrong lesson, that a silence without shots equals safety. Beyond the river, a different machinery hums, older than the flags now planted on surveyors' pegs. The Zulu state is not a ghost of Shaka left behind. It breathes in homesteads that feed men by duty, in age sets, called to stand as regiments, in Isandlwana who have learned the slope of every hill by foot. Paths no European ink has traced run like veins through grass and granite, a messenger network that carries orders faster than any ox team can deliver them. Where the British think in rectangles, company frontages, wagon parks, skirmish lines, the Zulu think in contours and edges, in where sound dies and sight fails, in what a fold of ground will hide at noon that it will not hide at 4. Logistics does not pick a side. It punishes whoever forgets it. The British bring rifles that bite at distance, tin-packed rations, ammunition boxed by rule and habit. Those rules were written for peace and parade, for measured issues and tidy ledgers. They begin to crack the first time a runner is told to wait while a crate is counted twice. The Zulu bring bodies hardened by long walks, shields that are not walls but weather, spears that do not care about mud, and the discipline to hold energy in a clenched fist until the hour comes. One force bets on the speed of metal and wheels, the other on the speed of feet and the memory of ground. Look at the hill country where this will happen. Basalt shoulders rising from grass, shallow valleys that seem open until you walk into them and find the earth has folded you out of sight. There are gullies that swallow a file without a sound, and a saddle of land that leads away like a promise. No doctrine written far away can change what that shape does to men who stand upon it. The British column measures progress in miles. The Zulu staff measure opportunity in angles. Both believe they are reading the same place. Only one has learned how it speaks. By the time any bugle calls, the board is already set. An ultimatum has done its work and turned politics into marching. The imperial plan is still the imperial plan: converge, pin, finish. But the ground is not a diagram. It's a living argument, and it is about to take a side. If you want to understand what happens next, you have to understand this first. The empire arrives with a story about how battles should look, and Zululand answers with a language of hills and patience. His name travels less than his work. Ntshingwayo kaMahole, moves through the army like a steady current, the kind that shapes a riverbed without calling attention to itself. He is an Nkosi who has learned to speak in the grammar of decisions, where to stand, when to breathe, how much to show and how much to hide. Around evening fires, he does not fan speeches. He draws with a stick in the dust while the Isandlwana watch the lines gather sense. He does not trade in slogans. He trades in odds, in the patient arrangement of men and minutes, until chance has nowhere left to sit. His purpose is not to win a beautiful clash, but to prevent one. The invader wants a single, theatrical afternoon, lines set square to the earth, a rhythm of volleys that proves a point to men in distant rooms. Ntshingwayo's aim is quieter and harder to unmake that picture before it forms, to keep the British from a clean decision, to thin their certainty until it frays. He wants them pulled long across ground they do not understand. He wants their confidence to lag behind their wagons. He wants their camp to feel roomy enough that no one thinks to lock the door. Victory for him is not a shout at the end. It is the closing of choices, one by one, until the only path left leads inward. He knows what he cannot afford. What he fears is not death. Death comes to soldiers by trade, but the sudden spill of courage at the wrong time. A premature surge by the chest, a horn racing the sun, a song lifted before the signal. These are the mistakes that feed rifles with brave bodies and waste the only currency that matters: discipline. He sets rules that live in the muscles. Shields ride low until the last sprint. Runners carry gestures, not speeches. The Amabatho learn to mark distance by breath, not by the eye, because the eye lies when the blood is hot. He drills the army to resist the oldest hunger, the need to be seen, and teaches them the harder art of being present but unread. What he possesses is not a talisman but an advantage earned from years of listening to the country with his feet. He knows which folds of grass swallow men whole and which ridgelines look high but speak loud to the enemy's view. He knows how sound travels in that valley after noon and how light flattens faces against pale stone at 3. He understands the tempo of runners and the patience of reserves, and the way a reserve spent twice is squandered. He has watched the British long enough to understand their comforts, the way they trust open ground, the way rules follow their cartridges like shadows, and he has learned to time the knife to the moment their rhythm falters. He choreographs quiet. He lets scouts catch edges and never the center. He sets snares made of absence, a decoy here, a delay there, until the map in the enemy's mind peels away from the ground under his feet. There is nothing mystical in it. Before dawn he stands on a rise and counts the breaths between gusts of wind. He taps a knuckle once against a shield and a message travels without a word. He watches the sun tilt, measures a column's patience, and writes in the air with the smallest gesture a sentence the army already knows how to finish. If a general can be said to have a voice, his is the tension before a storm, the sense that something vast has been arranged without noise, and that when it finally moves, it will move like weather, inevitable because it was prepared. The plan begins with restraint. Ntshingwayo kaMahole builds a shape in his mind that looks simple from above and complex from the ground. A chest to hold, 2 horns to reach for the edges of the world, and a hidden weight, the loins that does not move until movement will end things. Geometry is only the scaffolding. The true material is patience. He knows the enemy is loud when they are sure of the picture in front of them, so he takes the picture away. He tucks the main body into folds of land where sight frays into guesswork. He lets the hills speak for him. From certain angles there is nothing to see, from others just enough to tempt a report. Movement here, dust there, not quite an army, not quite a ghost. Scouts ride back with fragments. Fragments breed decisions. Decisions, if leaned upon, become errors made in full daylight. His doctrine could be written in 3 sentences. Close the exits before you close the distance. Show hints, never mass. Spend your reserve once. Everything else is choreography. The chest is calm and heavy, a hand placed squarely on the enemy's front to pin their attention to what is loudest. The horns are youth and speed and angle, curved long rather than thrown straight, not toward the strongest fire but toward the places where a line becomes a door. One horn leans far for the saddle that leads to the river because a path behind you is not a road, it is a promise. Break it, and men feel the break before they see it. The other horn feels for the seam where frontage thins into worry. They move not like a charge, but like weather bending around stone, taking what the ground offers and refusing to announce themselves until shape becomes fate. Concealment here is not hiding, it is pacing. Runners stitch the formation with messages carried on breath instead of noise. A clenched fist opens a finger at a time. A decoy ripples on the plateau to pull the absent British commander farther into the hills. The chest slides forward at a walk that looks like stillness, and the horns lengthen their arc until they can touch the day from behind. Ntshingwayo times all of it against a rhythm that does not belong to him, the cadence of foreign rifles and the slower heartbeat of their supply. He does not need their wagons to be empty. He needs their rules to be present. If cartridges arrive at the rate of a ledger, and the shots go out at the rate of fear, a gap appears that cannot be bridged by will. He keeps the loins folded like a word unspoken. Reserves are the most eloquent argument in war, and the easiest to waste. They are not for improving a moment. They are for deciding a day. He waits for the instant when the enemy's fire begins to come apart, when the volleys that were storms become weather with holes in it, and then, and only then, the hidden weight will move. It is a plan that does not shine in a song because it is made of refusals. Do not answer too soon. Do not run where the ground says walk. Do not flatter courage by throwing it away. The innovation is not a new spear or a clever trick. It is the use of land and time as if they were weapons, and silence as if it were a rank all its own. The first sign is not an attack but a thinning of certainty. Late morning, the plateau to the northeastern shoulder lifts a shimmer of dust that looks like a tail without a body. Scouts ride, disappear, return with reports too small to be wrong and too neat to be true. In the camp, the wagons stand spaced like furniture, unlinked. The ground between them open as a promise, and no one has drawn them into a circle because open ground still feels like safety. Men clean their rifles, stack their tins, measure the air with casual glances that say, if danger were coming, we would hear it. They are listening for the wrong sound. Across the folds, the right horn lengthens first. It does not run toward the muzzle flash as it expects. It slides broad and low across the grass, choosing the line that touches the day from behind. The target is not the strongest company on the ridge. The target is the saddle that leads away to the Buffalo River. A road is not merely exit, it is a pressure valve for the mind. Close it, and the fight changes temperature. As the horn moves, it uses the earth like a sleeve. Swales to blunt sight, faint rims of ground to mask a jog, the long curving path that seems slow on a map and proves fast on a man's nerves. The line in the camp still faces forward. By the time anyone glances back, the horn is already shadow at the edge of vision. The chest rises later, not as a shout but as a slow, dark intake of breath. From the British line, it looks like the world standing up. Rifles answer at once clean, drilled volleys, a rhythm that was born far from this hill and has survived a century because it kills what it can see. The first ranks of shields stagger and go down. In another kind of army, this would be the moment to falter. In this one, files close without speech. A second line steps into the bullet-warmed air, and the ground is paid for in meters and seconds. The advance is not constant. It pulses. Men run and fall to a knee. Others fill the seam. The living learn from the dead which stance keeps a rib below the shot. The chest is not trying to win the day by nerve. It is trying to keep the day occupied while the edges shape it. On the opposite flank, the left horn moves like water where stone has cracked. Dongas, those dry gullies that read as scars from a distance, and as corridors when your boots are in them, take a whole file under the plain without a sound. From the camp, the rifles fire where the grass moves. In the dongas, the horn goes quiet and reappears where the line ends in air. A formation that must suddenly face to a new cardinal point thins itself to do it. A formation that must do that twice becomes two arguments that no longer agree. The left horn does not need to break the front. It needs to touch the line's spine and make it flinch. Just past noon, the rifle rhythm peaks. The cadence is all muscle memory. Bite the cartridge, close the breech, shoulder and fire, step and repeat, and the air between the lines turns granular with lead and dust. But the relationship between crate and muzzle is beginning to fail. The cartridges exist. The doctrine that governs their movement also exists, and the two complicate each other. Runners arrive at the wagons with the wrong marks, or with the right marks at the wrong moment, and are told to wait while a ledger is satisfied. Company boundaries that make sense in a manual make no sense in a collapsing field. It is not the screws in the lids, it is the rules in the heads. A minute here, a minute there, and the volley that was a drumroll becomes a syncopation, then a stutter. The chest hears the change before the men issuing cartridges do. Ntshingwayo kaMahole has kept the loins folded for this sound. He has no interest in feeding courage into an unbroken cadence. He spends his hidden weight when the air between the shots grows wide enough to breathe. A gesture travels by runner like a spark along a fuse, invisible to an eye that seeks banners and trumpets. The reserve moves not to be seen but to be present, where presence will finish. And suddenly the ground behind the camp is not space but shape. The arc of the right horn touches the heel of the left, and the camp that looked unbound becomes a bowl. What happens next is fast and close, and mostly made of breath. Where the front had been a geometry of figures and ranges, the fight collapses into terrain measured in arms and hands. The British companies that can form knots do so, faces turned outward, bayonets a crown of small suns. For a while each knot holds a world together, and then weight, not will, tilts it over. Elsewhere men break for the river, and the river accepts what it can and refuses what it must. The chest is no longer pressing, it is leaning. The horns are no longer feeling for edges, they are closing them. Ntshingwayo does not chase fugitives, he tightens the circle, because a circle that runs becomes an arc, and an arc can be pried open. The doctrine remains what it was at dawn. Close options before you close distance. And then the light itself changes. Mid-afternoon, the sun suffers a bruise and the day goes thin as if a veil had been drawn. Men call it a sign. Omens always arrive when a story wants them. But the path of the shadow did not bait the scouts on the plateau, did not teach runners to carry orders in breath, did not hold a reserve past the hour of pride. The quiet work did that. While the dimness passes and the cries lift, the structure does not. The fight continues to behave as designed. The last resistance on the slopes breaks into islands too far from one another to share courage. The ground that had seemed open divides them. The gullies that had served approach now serve escape, and it is too late to know the difference. 2 hours is a strange measure for a day that will be talked about for a century. It is long enough for a doctrine to prove itself and short enough that those who must answer for it will claim accident. Walk the field at the end, and you can read the sequence in what remains. The thrown stacks of cartridge wrappers where the cadence died. The fine dust on a shield's lower rim where it was kept low, just as taught. The angle of bodies against the fall of the slope that shows whether men were facing inward or outward when the circle closed. The plan has become visible the way a net is visible only when it is full. The camp dies not in a line but in a shape, and the shape is the one Ntshingwayo drew in the first hour. Chest to hold, horns to erase, loins to decide. The noise doesn't end so much as it thins until wind can be heard again. Where a camp had arranged itself like a market square, there is only a broken geometry of canvas and wood, a scatter of tins, a churned strip of earth glazed with dust and the dark of spilled lives. In the space of an afternoon, the place has lost its meaning. Tents are no longer rooms, wagons no longer tools, and the neat distances between things have collapsed into a single, heavy nearness. Men lie where the line bent and where it finally gave way. Others are found with canteens uncapped, as if thirst could be solved faster than angle. The ground keeps a ledger in objects, the snapped strap, the cartridge wrapper drifted into a boot print, the bayonet pointing nowhere, and it reads the same entry over and over. Victory pays its own price. Some Zulu regiments stand ragged with loss, breath working like a bellows through chests that have run too far and fought too close. There is relief, and there is the shock that follows it. There are names shouted and not answered. Shields are stacked, then used as stretchers. Water is carried in anything that will hold it. Rifles are gathered by the armful, heavy with promise and doubt. A few men try them at once and learn the quick grammar of a new machine. Others mistrust the noise they make and tuck them away for later. Ammunition lies in pockets and boxes in the mouths of the slain. It belongs to no one in particular and to whoever is quick enough to claim it. Herds are pushed together, food is brought in. The camp's wealth turns inside out and becomes someone else's burden to sort. From higher ground, the shape of what has happened is mercilessly clear. The open field that had offered the comfort of distance now offers no cover at all for the living who move among the dead. A few British knots are still visible where they fell together, traces of a world held for minutes against a world that arrived to stay. Others have reached the river and left their decision written in wet footprints and voids where bodies should be. The sun goes on as if this were any other day, edging down toward the ridges. The air cools. Smoke rises from somewhere beyond the water and stains the light. Ntshingwayo kaMahole does not let the victory run away with itself. Runners go out and return. Units are counted as best they can be. The circle relaxes just enough to become a line again. No one sings yet. There is work, binding wounds, pulling comrades from the grass, lifting what can be used and leaving what must be mourned. The ground has changed sides, and until night settles and the last orders are given, it still asks a commander's attention. The silence that follows the collapse does not stay in the valley. It travels by dispatch across oceans and arrives in rooms where defeat is something to be interpreted, rephrased, managed. In London, the word passes through many mouths: alarm, indignation, then resolve. And by the time it is returned to the frontier, it has become weight. Columns thicken. Every halt grows earthworks and ditches. Where wagons once sat like furniture, they are now roped tight and rimmed with trenches. Engineers mark out squares on the ground and teach officers to live inside lines. The redcoat remains, but it changes its posture. It learns to sleep with a spade within reach. Reinforcements come until the coast is a hinge for a heavier door. The second advance is slower and more deliberate, a march that refuses to provide the gaps a patient enemy can turn into opportunities. Scouts are pushed farther. Pickets sit on every rise. The river is crossed with one eye on the bank behind. When the enemy is finally faced, it is done on terms that have been chosen like a courtroom. On the 4th of July, 1879, outside Ulundi, the army forms a hollow square that bristles with rifles and mouths of iron that turn a charge into smoke. The shape holds. The Zulu advance breaks and breaks again until the field is a heat-hazed mirage of men who have given everything and found a wall where a door once stood. The royal homestead burns. The king goes to ground. The war does not end with a treaty so much as with a dismantling. Power is redrawn with a ruler. The kingdom is cut into chiefdoms that are encouraged to quarrel, a political carpentry meant to make unity difficult and obedience convenient. Alliances splinter, old rivalries are fed, and the ground that was defended as one becomes a board arranged for others to play upon. In the years that follow, civil war consumes more Zulu lives than any foreign battle did. Ntshingwayo kaMahole, who understood better than most how to turn land and time into advantage, is pulled into that struggle and killed by rival forces. There is no monument that can carry the method he left behind. The lesson lives in the way a commander counts angles before he counts men. For the empire, the day we have just watched becomes both a scar and an instruction. It learns to fear distance, to fortify habitually, to mistrust anything that looks like an easy morning. For the Zulu, the same day becomes a measure of what resolve can achieve, and a preface to loss proof that a plan can break inevitability, and reminder that even a perfect plan cannot hold back weight forever. Maps change, yes, but something else changes that no pencil can redraw: the belief in who must win. On a hill where cairns will later bloom white against the grass, the myth of certainty was taken apart by a man and an army who refused to be what the imperial story needed them to be. That is the legacy that lives beneath every subsequent line on every subsequent map. History does not forget evenly. It sheds names in the places where the record keepers find little use for them. What happened on that hill is written into British reports as a calamity to be corrected, not as a lesson to be credited. Prose sent home from the frontier prefers passive grammar. Errors were made, unfortunate circumstances conspired, a camp was surprised. Notes written in this key cannot quite bring themselves to speak the active truth that someone opposed them with understanding. It is tidier to let the day belong to accident than to admit that a commander in isiZulu read them cleanly and set their bearings against them. The shelves where the world goes to learn are stocked with paper that speaks English and remembers what paper remembers. Medals awarded at Rorke's Drift. Dispatches reframing Isandlwana as an aberration. Convenient tales about lids and screws and eclipses. Those stories offer comfort because they explain defeat while guarding pride. They push attention toward a small garrison that stood and away from a staff that made a large army fall. They conjure omen and mishap so the mind can step around the idea of being outthought. In that arrangement of memory, Ntshingwayo kaMahole becomes a pressure in the background, a weather system without a name. There is also the matter of how the Zulu remembered and how others chose not to listen. Praise singing turns regiments and kings into sound that carries. It does not often sing the virtues of patience, of timing, of a reserve held like breath. The craft that made the day was a craft of absences, no flourish, no speech, only a sequence of withheld answers, and the archive of empire has few hooks for such a story. When the kingdom was later cut apart and set quarreling, those who might have kept his name bright were dragged into survival rather than commemoration. Ntshingwayo was killed in that internal violence. A monument could not rise from a ground deliberately made to fracture. To study the sources is to feel the tilt. We inherit official diagrams and marching tables, then walk the slope at Isandlwana and see a different text, the one written in the way the dongas bend, in the distance from wagon to muzzle, in the arc of closure behind the camp. That text has an author. If he is absent from the popular shelf, it is because omission was useful. To administrations that needed the next invasion to look inevitable. To readers who preferred a marvel or a blunder to the admission that method defeated them. Forgetting him was not an accident, it was an economy of attention. So we say the name that the reports bury in clauses, and the histories skim. We restore cause where others preferred coincidence. We understand that the work of a quiet professional can be the loudest page in a nation's story, even if it arrives without a monument. The day is famous. It is time the author of its shape is too. What then should be carried out of this hill besides grief? Take the kind of knowledge that survives uniforms and eras. Learn first. That place is not background but instrument. If you can choose where a contest happens, you have already moved the scale. Slopes, folds, and the lines where sight fails are tools as sharp as steel. Learn, second, that supply is a battle of its own, and it is fought in minutes, not miles. Plans die where the link between what is needed and what arrives is governed by pride, habit, or paperwork. Design for the flow, and you design for survival. Learn, third, that concealment is not the art of vanishing but the discipline of partial truth. Let adversaries see enough to be confident and never enough to be correct. A hint well placed is more powerful than a shout. Learn, fourth, that the surest pressure is applied to choice, not to flesh. When exits close, mind and body tilt together. A ring of denied possibilities breaks formations faster than any single charge. And learn finally that power held back is the only power that can finish. A reserve spent to improve a moment is squandered. A reserve saved to decide an hour is strategy. These are not sayings for a museum wall. They are a working kit for anyone who must turn uncertainty into outcome. Count the angles before you count the heads. Choose ground before you choose speed. Measure timing not by courage but by what the other side cannot replenish. The day is gone into the past, but the method stays portable. Ntshingwayo kaMahole leaves no statue to point at. He leaves a way to think. If this film has shifted the way you hold Isandlwana in your mind, say the name with us, Ntshingwayo kaMahole, and help keep it where it belongs. Share this story so the method is louder than the myth. Subscribe to stay with us as we build an archive that credits craft and agency, not coincidence. In the comments, choose where the UN Sung series turns next. Mbofa Kasithai, the fixer whose whisper ended a reign, or Zwide Kalanga, the rival whose pressure forged an empire. Tell us why you choose, and add what only you can bring: family memories, local names, sources in Zulu and English, corrections that make the record stronger. We will read them, fold them in, and return with receipts, maps, and voices that refuse to be footnotes. This is African Power Stories, a place to learn how power was actually exercised and to keep saying the names that paper forgot. The hill is quiet now, but the work is not. Walk with us and help carry this story so that the next time someone reaches for a miracle, they find a plan and the person who made it.